Welcome, friends. This is Brian Trumbore with your first of what I hope will be years of nightly reviews. Initially it's going to be Monday through Thursday, and I'll need a week or two to iron out the kinks. Some of the audio components haven't worked as well as I had hoped, but we'll get there. The goal is to tape around 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time and post around 5:30. It's going to be a while before I'm streaming this live. It's going to be the same material you're used to on Stocks and News, though from time to time I'll throw in some edgier commentary to take advantage of what will in the end be a much wider platform. Today on Wall Street, stocks were down. The Dow Jones was down over 100 points at one point, but rallied back to close up 2 points at 13,345. The S&P 500 was essentially unchanged, and NASDAQ was up 11, 0.4%, thanks in no small part to Apple, which suddenly reversed and finished up $24 at $6.34 on probably hoped for positive reaction to the iPad mini being introduced later this week. London's FTSE index was down 0.2%, and the German DAX was down 0.7%. Gold as of 4 o'clock was at $17.29. Oil, as measured by West Texas Intermediate, which is what I use, is $88.73 a barrel. And the yield on the 10-year Treasury finished at 1.81%. Caterpillar released earnings today. They beat expectations on the bottom line, earning $2.54 a share, but the top line sales failed to meet expectations. Nonetheless, sales next year will be, according to CEO Doug Oberhelman, either down 5% or up 5% from 2012 results, though Oberhelman is fairly optimistic that China has bottomed. There was some news on the Monster beverage energy drink front. According to Anna Edney, Bloomberg News, Monster beverage drinks have been cited in the deaths of 5 people in the past year, according to incident reports that doctors and companies submit to the US FDA. The 5 reports received by the agency said the victims consumed Monster drinks prior to their deaths. Shelley Burgess, an FDA spokeswoman, said today in a telephone interview that the agency said the incidents, which are voluntarily reported, are considered to be allegations and no conclusion is drawn until a full investigation is completed. As I like to say, wait 24 hours, at least on this one. Monster shares did tumble by about 10%. Overseas, clashes in Lebanon continued following the assassination on Friday of Major General Hassan, the head of the intelligence branch of the internal security forces. He had been an outspoken critic of the government of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and Lebanese opposition figures have blamed Damascus for the attack, and having been there a couple times, I can tell you it probably was Damascus and Assad's henchmen. At least 3 people have been killed in further violence in the northern city of Tripoli, which had seen lots of clashes the past few months. But now the war has spilled over from Syria into Lebanon, and it's not a good situation, friends. In Jordan, Jordanian authorities unveiled on Sunday a foiled al-Qaeda terror plot to carry out attacks on diplomatic and civilian targets across Oman using weapons from Syria. According to the General Intelligence Department, this is from the Jordan Times, security services have arrested 11 Jordanian nationals charged with plotting to carry out a series of attacks on shopping centers, cafes, and diplomatic missions using explosives and mortar rockets. 11 suspects whose pictures I saw, and they are bad-looking people, have allegedly have active ties with Al-Qaeda in Iraq. They began plotting the attacks in June and were smuggling explosives and mortar rockets from Syria to carry out the attacks. Of course, tonight is the third and final presidential debate. It's on foreign policy. NBC News Wall Street Journal poll released yesterday shows that overall nationwide among likely voters, it's a tie at 47%, though a Gallup tracking poll from October 15th to October 21st showed Mitt Romney up by 6. In the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, Barack Obama is leading among Hispanics by 45 points, 70 to 25. Mitt Romney, on the other hand, is polling, Barack Obama is taking only about 36% of white voters versus exit polls in 2008, which showed him at 43%. Whites make up about 70% of the electorate. In Ohio, the two latest polls, CBS News, Quinnipiac, Obama leads 50 to 45, but a Suffolk poll taken October 18th to October 21st has a tie in Ohio at 47. The same NBC Wall Street Journal poll, as reported by David Wessel, shows that 45% of registered voters said they expect the economy to get better over the next 12 months, compared with 42% who said so a month earlier. Only 9% said they expect the economy to get worse in the coming year, compared with 18% who said so a month earlier. Now that 9% is the smallest fraction to say they anticipate the economy to worsen in any Wall Street Journal poll going back to 1993. Again, that was from David Wessel of the Journal. Of course, tonight with the foreign policy debate, the focus is going to be on Libya and the Benghazi attack. It would seem one U.S. official is now telling the Los Angeles Times that there, quote, isn't any intelligence that the attackers pre-planned their assault days or weeks in advance. Most of the evidence so far suggests that the attackers launched their assault opportunistically after they learned about the violence at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo earlier that day. Of course, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Wright, has been widely criticized for comments she made on a round of talk show appearances September 16, when she said the attack appeared to have stemmed from a protest over the video, similar to the violent demonstration at the embassy in Cairo. So that is going to be the focus tonight. But Bloomberg's Jeffrey Goldberg said he'd like to ask some questions of both candidates Obama and Romney. For Obama, Goldberg asked the following: your administration has denied reports that it plans to enter direct negotiations with Iran, yet you have indicated a continued willingness to talk directly with the Iranian regime. What signs have you seen that suggest the Iranians may be willing to give up their nuclear program, and why should the U.S. enter negotiations given the Iranian record of using such talks as cover for advancing their nuclear program? Among Jeffrey Goldberg's other questions that he would ask tonight, why of Obama? Why have you not visited Israel once in 4 years as president? Why do you spend so little time building friendships with foreign leaders, especially leaders of allied countries? It's a pet peeve of mine personally for all of our presidents over the years. Goldberg would also ask the question, you've promised to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan by 2014. What would you do if U.S. intelligence informed you at the end of 2014 that the Taliban was poised to capture Kabul and once again assert control over most of Afghanistan? One of the questions that Goldberg would ask of Mitt Romney: you've promised that the first country you will visit as president is Israel. Why not Canada, Mexico, or the UK? Is Israel America's most important ally? Personally, I would visit Canada and then Mexico and then go to China. But when I went to Canada, I would make sure a broad-based energy deal was signed. Another question for Romney: how do you plan to keep Pakistan from imploding? Turning to street bites, the London Times, Nick Fildus interviewed Mark Hurd of Oracle, the president of Oracle, who said the amount of data being produced by the 9 billion devices connected to the internet had grown 8-fold over the past 7 years, putting incredible strain on the companies that need to process and store it all. The situation will get worse as the number of devices feeding information back to businesses, be it a smartphone or a sensor on an oil rig, will boom to 50 billion by 2020. This will drive a 20-fold increase in the amount of information being beamed back to servers. So that's causing big problems for customers and tremendous economic pressure, according to Mr. Hurd. Most of our customers are trying to innovate while cutting cost. Nick Fildus of the London Times then says his comments are significant because cloud computing, whereby computing resources are delivered as a service over a network from remote data centers, has become a key part of Oracle's strategy. I would just suggest that some of the corporations look at Workday, which just had their IPO. Oil giant BP agreed to sell its 50% stake in TNK-BP to Russia's Rosneft in return for cash and shares, which has the blessing of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said state-controlled Rosneft had made a good deal at a good price. The acquisition of the stake in TNK-BP, one of Russia's biggest oil firms, will give Rosneft about half of Russia's energy sector and make it the world's largest publicly traded oil group. The central bank in Germany announced that its economy may shrink by the end of the year as the euro crisis continues to bite. Greece's debt, as released by Eurostat today, is at 170% of GDP, a large jump from 148% in 2010, just a year and a half ago. Petronas was, Malaysia's Petronas was blocked from a takeover bid by Canada, which said it would not benefit the country. The takeover would have given Petronas access to shale gas reserves in the Montney region of British Columbia and Alberta. Petronas had wanted to buy Canadian oil and gas firm Progress Energy Resources. It now has 30 days to adjust its offer. I imagine it will. Owing to the territorial spat with China, Japan's exports fell 10% year-on-year in September. The exports to China fell 14%. A huge decline. Japan's exports to the U.S. were up just 0.9%, while shipments to Europe plunged 21.1%. This was interesting. 6 Italian scientists and an ex-government official have been sentenced to 6 years in prison over the 2009 deadly earthquake in L'Aquila, which the 6.3 quake killed 309 people. The 7, all members of the National Commission for the Forecast and Prevention of Major Risk, were accused of having provided inexact, incomplete, and contradictory information about the danger of the tremors felt ahead of the April 6, 2009 quake. Needless to say, scientists the world over are none too pleased with that one. Indian activist, American Indian activist Russell Means died. He was 72. He's best known for some of the protests he held at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Plus, in 1992, he starred in the title role of The Last of the Mohicans. And at one time, Russell Means attacked the Chief Wahoo mascot symbol of the Cleveland Indian baseball team. So we just offer it here in honor of Chief Wahoo, who has survived. Lance Armstrong was stripped of his 7 Tour de France titles by the International Cycling Union, UCI, which accepted the findings of the United States Anti-Doping Agency's investigation into Armstrong. UCI President Pat McQuaid said, quote, "Lance Armstrong has no place in cycling. He deserves to be forgotten." McQuaid added Armstrong had been stripped of all results since August 1st of 1998 and banned for life for doping. "This is a crisis, the biggest crisis cycling has ever faced," said McQuaid. "I like to look at this crisis as an opportunity for our sport and everyone involved in it to realize it is in danger and to work together to go forward. Cycling has a future. This is not the first time cycling has reached a crossroads or that it has had to begin anew." George McGovern died. Former senator, 1972 Democratic presidential candidate. He was 90. McGovern, among many other things, should be remembered for his 35 bomber missions over Europe in World War II, with his exploits described in Stephen Ambrose's The Wild Blue. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross and several air medals. Back in February of 2004, though, I just have to read you a bit from my week in review, February 21st of 2004. Guess who I met this week while he was walking his dog? Former Senator George McGovern. My parents said they knew where he just moved in on Marco Island, but word had it he wasn't familiar with the town's leash laws, so we drove by to check out the house, and lo and behold, there he was with his dog, Sans leash. I rolled down the window and said, "Senator McGovern, Brian Trumbore, longtime fan." Well, what would you have said? He walked over guardedly at first, shook my hand, said hello to Mom and Dad, and then we exchanged remarks on the just completed Wisconsin primary. I didn't say anything about him winning only one state in '72, but this was a good and decent man who also did a ton over his lifetime to alleviate hunger around the world, going back to 1961 when he was the first director of the United States Food for Peace Plan. He told the Washington Post just last month, speaking of his 1972 defeat, quote, "I wanted to win for our party, our young soldiers and the men and women of goodwill disaffected by Watergate and turned off by the power of big money in politics. But at the wise old age of 90, I can say that losing the presidency was one chapter in a long, complex, and richly happy life in which I learned that you can't always control all the outcomes." Turning to sports, I did see an item this afternoon for you Florida State fans. A sad one, dealt a major blow as senior running back Chris Thompson is going to miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL in his left knee. He's a good guy, good kid, who had rushed for 687 yards so far through 7 games, averaging 7.55 per carry. So that is a big hindrance to Florida State's slim chances of getting back in the BCS hunt. In case you missed it, the new AP poll had Alabama, Oregon, Florida, and Kansas State 1 through 4 in college football, but the BCS poll had Alabama, Florida number 2, Kansas State number 3, and Oregon number 4. For Duck fans out there, don't panic yet. Big TV night, San Francisco, St. Louis, Game 7, Kyle Loesch for the Cards up against Matt Cain of the Giants, 2 aces. 8 o'clock on Fox, 8:30, Monday Night Football, big game for the Lions, who are 2-3, really a must-win in my books. They go up against the 4-1 Bears, and then of course at 9 o'clock we have our presidential debate. So I'll be back with you tomorrow, Tuesday, sometime tonight. Say a little prayer for the men and women of our armed forces and remember the fallen. Our Aussie friends lost their 39th soldier to an IED in Afghanistan yesterday. They've been great allies, and they still have 1,550 troops there. God bless America. Peace.